think we're all a little bit sick and tired regarding this particular situation. Red Bull simply will not stop with making this situation all the more complicated. And right now, it's just gotten even more complicated with Isaac Hadjar now in consideration. Oh my god! Just make a decision, Red Bull! In an ideal world, I prefer one of two things. First, for Red Bull to just simply commit to Checo for 2025, at least as per his contract, and be done with it. And second, if they're going to be brave and remove Checo from the equation, just put Yuki in the car next to Max and be done with that too for a year. I'll touch upon both topics in a moment, but right now, it's just become really clear that logic seems to have evaded Red Bull regarding their driver lineup, and instead other factors are at play here. The way they would have gone about things regarding this matter a few years ago, no, it's completely alien to them now. And what's changed? Well, I mean, if you want to be cynical about it, it's simply down to the fact that they've got to have money. Red Bull got a taste for that Carlos Slim-backed investment and reward for keeping on Checo after Racing Point dropped him, as well as his substantial appeal to Mexico and Latin American regions. They simply cannot get enough of the stuff now. So what do? Well, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Honestly, if this were Christian Horner from 2019 or something like that, after the Belgian Grand Prix, Red Bull would have made a decision clear-cut and Daniel Ricciardo would be piloting the RB20 next to Max Verstappen, because it seemed like everybody within Red Bull thought that that was the way it was going to go, including Helmut Marko. Daniel himself was really chipper, despite the fact he only finished 10th. But then something happened. A meeting took place not long after the Belgian Grand Prix as we went into that summer break, which seemed like it lasted forever, and then suddenly everybody changed their tune. Nothing was going to be changing. Sergio was going to remain with the team, and then suddenly we saw Daniel reach the pits of despair, which culminated in Singapore. And to be fair, I could see the logic behind this decision, albeit it was a little bizarre in left field after what happened in Belgium, and the fact that the constructors was looking really precarious at that point, and this was before McLaren overtook them, that maybe these future tracks, including Baku, would actually appeal to Sergio's style. He might turn things around, get some podiums, really help in the fight to keep McLaren away from the top spot. And he's only scored 21 points after the summer break. No podiums, no top 5 finishes, none of that. And then you compare to how many points Max has accrued in that same time, and that is about 126. 6 times more than what Checo has scored. And I know that's not taking into account the whole season, but this is after the summer break when Perez got his latest chance. But when you compare it to the gap between Max and Pierre when the latter was dropped back in 2019, it was 181 to 63. Max had only 2.87 times more points, and granted, many people mentioned that Gasly rubbed some of his co-workers up the wrong way, so that wouldn't have helped matters in terms of him being retained. But the results matter the most in F1, and even though Albon did prove to be statistically worthwhile in regards to replacing Gasly, Perez's lot is mathematically a lot more straightforward than with Gasly. And whilst I don't intend to inflict scorn upon Perez and say that he's completely washed, I reckon that it's more to do with him simply not gelling well with the car. It can happen out there that styles of machine just simply don't work out for a particular driver. Like with Daniel Ricciardo at McLaren, it simply didn't work out for him. The same is happening with Checo in this latest iteration of the RB machine. Maybe he might do better at a different team where he can have a different role and a different purpose. Maybe, as I stated in my video from the other day, he might do well as being the veteran pair of hands over at the new Cadillac team, with mild Andretti support next to Colton Herta. You can find out more about my thoughts in the video up top, by the way, because I really do think it could be a viable solution and an initial lineup before Checo would eventually retire. But he would be able to do it on his own terms. But hey, at least compared to last year, Checo is a lot more steadfast and resolute in terms of his composition and his determination to remain in F1. Certainly a lot better than last year when Helmut Marko was giving it the beans, with Helmut mentioning in a recent interview that Checo's at least acting like he's going to be around next year. So hey, that's an improvement in my book. But the main point of this video comes now with this little bit of news courtesy of GP Blog and Viaplay. According to this source, the boss of Red Bull, and I'm talking about the entire company, that's Oliver Mintzlaff, I'm not talking about the boss of Red Bull Racing, so this actually goes a level higher than what was previously reported. He was spotted during the Las Vegas Grand Prix weekend, and also having a conversation with representatives from Williams Racing. Of course, we've had similar situations where reps from both F1 teams have met each other before, according to paddock insiders, but they're often dispelled as friendly chats between fellow F1 workers. Or if you recall what was going on between Bottas and Vowles and Williams, Bottas claimed that he'd simply run out of coffee, and he was going to be getting some from Williams' camp instead because he knew that they served good coffee. And I think Horner used the same excuse earlier in the year as well for going to Williams or something like that. Yeah, sure, coffee. Yeah, we all know what you mean, Christian. But for the CEO of the overall Red Bull outfit to take an interest in this certain matter, especially regarding a driver, that's definitely kicking things up a gear, isn't it? And I wouldn't have talked about the subject otherwise. To me, this could mean that talks between Williams about getting Franco Colapinto out of their wheelhouse and into the Red Bull one are really in advanced stages where it could actually happen, because you recall not that long ago that a reported $20 million was being exchanged between Red Bull and Williams to secure the services of Franco, and that is an extreme amount of money when you consider that McLaren gave Gabriel Bortoleto to Sauber for none. Nothing. Free. It's yet another dig at Red Bull, Zach. I see what you're doing there. But this is still something that we should really be paying attention to, regardless of which team Franco ends up at, Racing Bulls or Red Bull Racing. Because it's all very well and good hearing the likes of Horner and Marco going on about him. They've stated that many times that he's on their radar when it comes to potential drivers. But when Mintzlaff and Horner aren't exactly the best of friends and they're actually agreeing on something after what went down earlier in the year, that's a very interesting development if the plan has risen to the man upstairs. Because I liken this situation to what's going on at Ferrari, with John Elkann stepping in personally to make sure that the deal between them and Lewis Hamilton goes through, so that means he's racing for them and in red for 2025. So yeah, I feel like this is to a lesser extent with a lesser personality, but I still think it's perfectly a valid theory. You can't deny that something's happening in the background, even though Franco himself is being coy and pessimistic toward the media on the matter, saying that 2025 is a year which will see him doing something else other than F1. And let's not forget, I think his manager went on social media to tell people to shut up about what's going on and stop having an opinion about it, which tells me that maybe something is going on that is really, really serious and important to the future of Franco, and they don't want the chatter and all of the nonsense of us people in the media talking about it maybe distracting his client. And I fully get that, but yes, okay, all right, just having an opinion, all right, we want the best for Franco. But at the same time, I am really glad that Franco is actually being real about this and he's not buying into his own hype. He's just simply enjoying his time in Formula One at the moment. The opportunity that was gifted to him where he wouldn't have expected it would have ever have happened. And I can understand why some people are a little bit confused and quick to criticize after his noticeable errors in Brazil and Vegas, which has left the team boss not all that happy, but still very supportive according to Franco. And they can be explained away. The Brazil one reportedly is down to Franco wanting to come in for full wets. Williams ignored the instruction and request from the driver, and then ultimately he did crash out, proving his point. Whereas in Vegas, yeah, admittedly that was a bit of a skill issue. But one thing is for sure, something has become crystal clear in my eyes. Red Bull has simply not made a decision about what's going to be going on with their driver lineup for next year. Even though they claim that the situation is absolutely fine, that Verstappen and Checo will be together, Tsunoda will be leading Racing Bulls, and then probably Liam Lawson will be in next to him, there is still a lot up for debate, and there are still some other things and decisions and actions that need to be undertaken in the next few weeks before Red Bull can make any sort of commitment to any driver. The only thing that Red Bull can rely on right now is that Max Verstappen is intending to stay put and that he is focused on making sure that Red Bull continue to be competitive. Unless he finishes third or lower in a championship, because apparently that is an exit clause which he can actually engage to get himself out of the contract that lasts through 2028. But only then will I speculate. Right now, he's winning titles, so it's all good. As for the other drivers within the Red Bull camp, the next couple of months are going to be tense. Their future with the team very up for debate, which could easily go one way or the other. Both V-Carb drivers Tsunoda and Lawson are under constant scrutiny from the higher-ups at Red Bull, with the latter's current contract with the second Red Bull team not one that goes through the end of next year. Because from Liam's own words, with New Zealand media just days after the deal was confirmed and we saw the last of Daniel Ricciardo in a Formula One car, the contract that he has got is not one for the rest of this year and next year, it's just for this year. 6 races in which to prove himself worthy of then getting an extension and a full commitment for Red Bull to actually bring him on board. But let's be real, I personally think that what they were doing with Liam Lawson was something that Red Bull had to do if they wanted to have any chance of securing Liam at all, because if they dawdled any longer with the New Zealand driver, his team were very vocal about the fact, including Marco as well, that that he could go elsewhere for 2025, that he would be a free agent and there would be nothing that Red Bull could do about it because they just had their chance and then they would have blown it. And if he doesn't cut the mustard amongst everyone else vying for a Red Bull seat, then, fair enough. They would have given him a go and then see you later. But okay, let's also be real. They would hope that he would do well, and so far he's doing okay. Then there's Yuki Tsunoda, who's finally secured a chance to drive the RB20 for the Abu Dhabi test just days after the race is concluded, most likely acquired after much backroom wrangling from both Tsunoda and Honda. Now, as soon as that was confirmed that Tsunoda would be driving an RB20 at a track where just a few days ago they would have actually been in active competition and there'd be plenty of data in which to compare like for like, that was a really interesting addition, and yet another little bit of evidence for everyone to pass through at that shareholder meeting and therefore make their decision. And then there's Isaac Hadjar to consider, because now he's going to be driving Max Verstappen's car in FP1, and therefore he'll be going up against Sergio Perez in a live session, so that will be adding even more speculation. So right now we've got Isaac, we've got Liam, we've got Yuki. All three of them have been given an opportunity in current machinery to really see what they can do, because we've also got to take into account what happened at Silverstone earlier in the year when Liam Lawson was taking part in the Silverstone Pirelli tyre test. I am pretty sure that all the telemetry and the findings and all of the data will be shown to everyone involved in that December shareholder meeting, and hopefully the drivers will be there as well to plead their cases. But it's going to be a very long one that will probably take the whole day, maybe a couple of days to try and go through to see what is best for the commercial side of Red Bull and their future endeavours in the sport. So this has become so much more complex than I first thought. It's just giving me a headache. But I do believe having Tsunoda in the RB20 especially will be a key barometer, and it might outrank the relevancy of that Silverstone tyre test that Lawson undertook, because those Pirelli tyres, those were test tyres, not relevant to the 2024 race conditions or tyres. So if you can see that Yuki posts times that are similar to or better than Perez, that will further complicate matters and make the case for Perez and Lawson all the more difficult. Because right now, Yuki is doing his damnedest to try and keep himself cool, calm and collected, because there might be a chance for him to get a promotion, hoping that he can secure a position in this team after the Honda deal ends, and many people would be speculating he'd be cast aside, or he would go with Honda to another motorsport, or to Aston Martin as their reserve or something like that. No, he would ideally like to remain within the Red Bull family, and ideally be next to Max Verstappen, so he has a chance to become the most successful Japanese driver in Formula One history. And over time, I have noticed that in interview after interview after interview, Yuki is starting to get a little bit more pushy and forward and borderline assertive when it comes to his frustration regarding the matter of him not being involved in the conversation. Even though, let's be real, the Honda connection is a major stumbling block, because I think Red Bull would prefer to promote their own drivers where they can control the entire narrative and they don't have to listen to a provider that is outgoing. But when you look at CodeFX findings from the Las Vegas Grand Prix, out of the three other drivers in their field, Yuki was the most consistent and closest to Max in terms of performance and position, no more than 5 places behind him, which is something that can't be said for Checo or Liam throughout most of this campaign. Yes, of course, there is Liam to consider, and he did do a good job with AlphaTauri, stepping in at the last minute and scoring points in his tenure, and now scoring points again with Racing Bull's V-Carb, or whatever you want to call it, for next year or whatever. But I do feel like there is a very close competition between Lawson and Tsunoda, and right now, Lawson isn't blowing Tsunoda away. Neither, though, is Tsunoda blowing away Liam. It's really, really, really close. But Tsunoda just has that edge in terms of experience. This is his 4th season. He's going to be going into his 5th. And I'm really suspecting that if he doesn't get this promotion, he is destined to follow the same fate that Pierre Gasly had. That the excuse for him to remain at V-Carb is that, oh, he's a constant at Faenza. People love him there. He's a rock. He is there for stability and continuity's sake. Oh, that phrase really annoys me now. And yes, there are still 2 races to go in a sprint to decide things, and things could easily turn in either direction, and Lawson could absolutely sing. But things will be really, really crucial, especially for what's going on in F2, because there'll be Hadjar to consider. Should he take back the top spot in F2 from Gabriel Bortoleto, who has a place in F1 next year? Isaac won't be competing in any kind of motorsport next year if he isn't selected for Racing Bulls. What are they going to do with him? I mean, they could do what they did with Liam in 2023 and stick him in Super Formula, which actually turned out to be quite beneficial for the New Zealander, him saying that it was really good preparation for his acclimation into F1 and why it was so rapid, and he didn't simply just fall off the track in Zandvoort when it was absolutely pelting it down. I think in a way maybe Isaac is hoping that he doesn't win the championship this year, so that means he can still be in a relatively relevant campaign and also still close to what's going on, have his finger on the pulse as to the direction as to where all of these teams are going. But one thing is for sure, even though he didn't really set the world on fire when he was compared to Max Verstappen during the Silverstone FP1 session, unlike Franco Colapinto when he had that same plum, this time around, he will be straight up compared to Sergio in a live Formula 1 session. Yes, of course, it's FP1, and there are many other strategies that could be had, and there's also the possibility of Isaac being tasked with long runs to make sure that he doesn't push the car, because yes, this is Max's car, and they wouldn't want him breaking it, because he almost broke it in Silverstone, Checo's car, when almost colliding with Norris into turn 1. But at the same time though, I would hope that Isaac gets a chance to put on a set of soft tyres and then have a go at some push laps, and I'm pretty sure that one of the other tasks that will be going on is just to maybe do a like-for-like comparison between Checo and Hadjar. They do the same program, and then they can actually have apples to apples. Then of course there's the Carlos Slim debate, Sergio's long-term financial backer. And even though the talks between Slim and Red Bull might result in less money committed to the team according to reports, there is no cessation of a sponsorship had anytime soon, what with the conflict of logos between AT&T's partnership with Red Bull being expanded alongside Telmex. When this news broke, I wasn't exactly sure how to react to this. I was thinking that maybe this could be a bad sign for Checo, meaning that his backers would be less committed in case he is dropped mid-season, or it could mean that alternatively, there could be something else going on, because then we also heard about Kit Kat's commitment to being an official snack partner of Formula 1, and Checo does have a close connection with Nestle, so therefore that might mean he's sticking around a little bit longer, so it was a little bit convoluted and a little bit uncertain when I really dug into the details. However, then there was a little bit of news coming out from Carlos Slim's son regarding Franco Colapinto, and saying that they wouldn't be averse to the idea of backing him for a potential Formula 1 campaign. So when you think about maybe a reduced amount of sponsorship for Red Bull, so therefore you wouldn't want to be putting in as much money with somebody who has less race experience than the likes of Sergio, as well as less fan base. Although, we got to admit, Franco is catching up quite rapidly, and he does have the support of Checo, so that's only going to make things all the more improved for him. And Slim's son did make up a good point that they've not only backed Perez in terms of Formula 1, they backed the Fittipaldi brothers, Esteban Gutierrez, and Bruno Senna over the years. It's not just Sergio. So when you combine these two stories, Colapinto has the potential to be backed by a huge amount of sponsors, also being backed by Argentinian companies Mercado Libre and Globant, themselves increasing their sponsoring of F1 events. So yes, there might be some arguments saying that, oh, Franco's only sticking around Formula 1 because he got a lot of sponsors. Yeah, admittedly that's true, but in this world of Formula 1, you do need sponsors backing you. But these kind of sponsors will be absolutely immense to really build upon all the stuff that Franco has been able to prove on track. Nobody expected him to do well because he wasn't competing for a championship. He wasn't doing so in F3, not in F2, although he was in the top 5 or 6. When compared to Logan Sargent, who was fighting for the F3 title, and then what happened at Williams, the completely opposite situation happened with Franco, and he did exceed expectations. There is potential there. It just needs to be fostered in a car that can work with him. And I really hope that he doesn't go to Red Bull Racing next to Max. That's simply too much in terms of pressure cooker environment. Better yet, compared to Liam Lawson maybe, if Tsunoda gets a promotion, or something like that. So when you take that into consideration, maybe the Slim backing might be for a different driver entirely. So that's not really looking good for Sergio in that regard, despite his confident attitude that he is exuding. And yes, I know he does have a contract, but contracts can be broken and contracts can be bought out. New information can come to light, and with these last couple of races, these 3 drivers at play both in F2 and F1 will be giving it their all to make sure that they meet their respective objectives. Yuki Tsunoda doing his best alongside Liam to make sure that Racing Bulls get back up to 6th place in the Constructors, and therefore bring back that prize prize money and get that little bit closer to their ideal goal of 5th place in the Constructors, which admittedly is a little bit of a bridge too far after Aston Martin's early progress. Then there's the outlay to save Colapinto from the 2025 benches, which Williams might not outright say no to at this moment, given that their repair bill for this year is most likely going to be 8 figures. As you can probably imagine at the moment, there is a lot to unpack here, as well as reassemble. So yes, right now, the Red Bull saga is continuing in earnest, and it's just getting completely mind-boggling. Right now, there are 4 drivers vying for that spot next to Max Verstappen, even though that kind of barometer is a really intimidating barometer, but still, the Red Bull car, even though it has wobbled this year, is a competitive car, and there is an opportunity even for these 2 younger drivers to at least get some sort of exposure in Formula 1 over an entire season. But as far as I'm concerned, Max Verstappen doesn't really care about who's going to be next to him in terms of the car. He just wants to be doing his own thing. So honestly, I think the most easy situation would be that Max gets sat next to Yuki Tsunoda, he gets a promotion for 1 year just to see what he can do and to basically just appease him and Honda in their final year together. And then at Racing Bulls, it's Colapinto and Lawson, so that means they can fight it out amongst themselves as to who maybe gets the seat next to Max for 2026. If they choose to not continue with Yuki, they've done that 1 year, they've had enough, and then Hadjar gets promoted for 2026, so that means he can then be compared as to who loses between Colapinto and Lawson and who then gets promoted. That's the simple line of succession for the next 2 years. There you go. But right now, Red Bull's proving that they don't want to take it the simple way. They want to make it as hard as possible. But come on, it's so blindingly obvious. Much like how it's obvious that Charles Leclerc will not be the same driver from now on than he was before Las Vegas did its thing, revealing to us all that the long-time Ferrari driver has had enough of how things have been playing out there. To find out why I think Ferrari should be really careful about this right before Lewis Hamilton arrives as his teammate, watch this video next, straight after this one.